Some of our earliest memories while watching One Piece were the opening words of wealth, fame, and power. These were from the man who had acquired everything in the world. I'm of course talking about Gol D, the first character that we ever see in One Piece, even before Luffy. Our first impression of him comes from that opening scene from One Piece where he is grinning on a execution platform, and with his dying breath he sets the entire world on fire. What makes Roger such an interesting character to break down is that he exists purely as a legend. The shadow of his ghost has loomed over every single story arc, character, and dream that we've encountered. We know the ending of his story before we knew anything else about him. We are aware that he was the pirate king who hid his treasure somewhere and that he died. Piece by piece, as One Piece had unfolded, Oda slowly revealed who this man actually was. Gradually, the legend of Gol D started to feel more human. Roger was a man born in poverty who feared losing the people that he loved. He was a romantic who got flustered around beautiful women. He was a father who would never get to meet his son. And he was someone who laughed at the end of the world and cried at the suffering of his enemies. In this video, I'll be doing a definitive breakdown of everything that we know about Gol D, from his origins, his adventures, the relationships that he has, along with his impressive powers and abilities. Without Roger, there would have been no era of piracy, and thus none of the events that have unfolded within the story of One Piece would have occurred. So let's begin with his origins. Roger's story begins in the most unassuming place imaginable, Loguetown, a small port town in the East Blue. It's the same sea that would later produce Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Usopp, the weakest of the four blues supposedly, and yet this unremarkable corner of the world gave birth to the man who would become the king of the pirates. According to Garp, Roger grew up in difficult circumstances. We don't know the specifics of his childhood hardships, but whatever he experienced during those early years shaped him in a profound way. It instilled in him a deep, almost primal fear of losing his loved ones. This detail is easy to overlook, but it explains so much about who Roger became. His fierce protectiveness of his crew, along with his refusal to ever run away from a fight when his crew was threatened, all of this leading up to the decision to disband the Roger Pirates rather than watch them be hunted down after his death. All of this was because of his fear of loss, which was the emotional core which drove everything that he did. Sometime during his youth, Roger encountered a young man named Silvers Rayleigh. He was living on a boat that he had stolen after his house burnt down. Little did he know this was the first mate of his crew which didn't even exist yet. Roger's invitation to Rayleigh is pretty absurd. He doesn't ask Rayleigh to go on an adventure. He doesn't promise treasure or glory. He asks him to help him turn the world upside down. Roger had a dream that was so impossibly massive that it could have only come from someone who genuinely believed that they could achieve it. Rayleigh refused at first, because of course he did. What sane person agrees to that? But Roger's insistence won him over in the end, and from that moment on, those two were inseparable, best friends up until the very end. With Rayleigh as his first mate, Roger began assembling what would become the most legendary pirate crew in history. The structure of the Roger Pirates is actually pretty interesting when you examine it closely. Unlike a lot of pirate crews that we see in the series, Roger's crew had clearly defined roles beyond just fighters. They had a tactical officer in Moon Isaac Jr., an interrogator in Melee Pine, a scholar in Rowing, an information broker in Erio, and an intelligence officer in Spencer. They gradually became an organized operation which was designed to gather information and navigate the world's secrets. The senior members of the crew had names based upon precious metals. There was Gol D, Silvers Rayleigh, Scopper Gaban, Gold, Silver, and Copper. The hierarchy of their strength and position within the crew was built into their very names, and these three specifically were monsters in combat. We've seen glimpses of what Rayleigh can do even in his old age, as he held his own against an admiral. Scopper Gaban recently demonstrated his power in Elbaf, that he can casually slice through castle walls with barely any effort. These were Roger's left and right hands, and they were among the strongest fighters of their generation. But the crew extended beyond these three powerhouses. There was Sunbell, the only fishman on the crew, and one of the most physically imposing members, wielding a trident as his weapon of choice. There was also Max Marks, who was absolutely massive and covered in ink, serving as the ship's cook despite looking like he could punch through a warship hull. Donquino served as the helmsman and looked like Oda drew him straight out of an old-fashioned sailor movie, complete with a striped shirt, sailor's cape, and pipe. CB Gallant carried a sword with a shapen handle surprisingly similar to Mihawk's legendary blade Yoru, giving off serious gladiator vibes that suggest that he might have originated from Dressrosa's Colosseum. The combat specialists were genuinely terrifying. Yammon and Rangram looked like reincarnations of the Shandian warrior Kalgara, as they appear to look ready to throw down with anyone using their spear and axe. Then there's Taro, who rounds out the heavy hitters in the crew. There was also Jackson Banner, who uses the same claw weapons that Blackbeard wielded as a child. Whether if there's some connection between him and the former Whitebeard pirate remains to be a mystery, but it's an intriguing detail. Some of Roger's crew honestly look like complete bums compared to these fighters that I've listed. Ariel wears a Hawaiian shirt with a floppy hat like some tourist who wandered onto the wrong ship. Rowing is hands down the most derpy looking member of the crew. Blue Marine rocks an old-fashioned striped prison shirt. Spencer just seems like an ordinary dude with a sword. You look at these guys and wonder how they ended up on the Pirate King's crew alongside monsters like Rayleigh and Gaban, but Roger clearly saw something in everyone that he recruited. What's most striking about the Roger Pirates is how much they genuinely love their captain. Rayleigh described Roger as a magnificent man. When Roger died, his crew didn't just mourn him, they wept. Shanks and Buggy were sobbing at his execution. Odin simultaneously laughed and cried when he heard the news. Even decades later, the surviving members speak of Roger with reverence and affection. The Roger Pirates were not a crew that was held together by fear like the Rock's pirates. Roger earned genuine loyalty through who he was as a person. At some point, the Roger Pirates commissioned a new ship from Tom, the legendary shipwright of Water 7. Using wood from the treasure tree Adam, Tom constructed the Oro Jackson. This ship would carry Roger and his crew across the Grand Line and into legend. Tom was so proud of building that ship that he openly boasted about it, even when that admission led to his death sentence. Building the Pirate King's ship was worth dying for in Tom's eyes. That's the kind of impact that Roger had on the people that he met. Now we need to talk about something that's driven the One Piece community a bit insane for years. On the Oro Jackson, clearly visible in multiple panels and episodes, sits a gigantic egg. This thing is massive as it towers over the crew members nearby and nobody ever says a single word about it. What is this thing? Where did it come from and what happened to it? From what we can piece together, Roger had this egg before he reached Laughtail. We see it on the ship during his battle against Shiki at the Ed War. This occurred after he reached Lodesta Island and learned about the road poneglyphs. This suggests that he probably acquired the egg at Lodesta or somewhere along that stretch of his journey. The crew didn't just bring it to Laughtail either, because the egg is still visible with them after they left that island. So what did they do with it and where is it now? The questions just multiplied the more that you think about it. Speculation runs wild about what could be inside it. One popular theory suggests it's an actual dragon egg. We know dragons existed in the One Piece world, so maybe this is the last remaining egg from that species. Some have theorized that it could be connected to an ancient weapon. We know it's not Poseidon or Pluton, but could it be Uranus? The ancient weapon supposedly has some connection to the sky, and something hatching from a giant egg and flying would fit that description. Emu currently possesses Uranus, but perhaps they acquired it after Roger's death, since we haven't seen the egg in over 20 years. There's also this hilarious theory that Big News Morgans hatched from this egg. Can you imagine the disappointment of the century if the mysterious egg just produced a newspaper mogul? And some fans have theorized that Luffy was born from the egg, but come on, we don't actually believe that one. It's genuinely one of the things that I'm most curious about within One Piece. The fact that Oda included this giant egg in multiple scenes, he made it clearly visible, and he has never once explained it, suggests that it has to be important. In terms of Roger's personality, this is where things get interesting, because on the surface, he seems almost contradictory. He was fearless to the point of insanity, grinning even as executioner blades descended toward his neck. People who witnessed his death claim that he smiled right before the end. In every single appearance throughout the manga, Roger has that confident smile. The man genuinely did not know how to be afraid, but Roger was also quick to anger in ways that could be terrifying. Garp described him as violent, selfish, and short-tempered when provoked. He would retaliate viciously for something as simple as an insult to his crew, regardless of how small the slight may have been. He once destroyed the military force of an entire country because they disrespected his crewmates. He personally killed every single member of Squad's crew for reasons that have never been explained. When Roger got angry, people died. But yet Garp also noted that despite his volatility, Roger's actions were pure and straight, just like a child. This is such a perfect encapsulation of who he was. Roger had that same same childlike quality that Luffy possesses. He charged headfirst into adventure without calculating risks. He made decisions based on what felt right rather than what was strategically optimal, and he got excited when he encountered strong enemies instead of being cautious. When he met Oden for the first time, Roger pushed past both Rayleigh and Gaban because he wanted to fight this interesting new opponent himself. The comparisons between Roger and Luffy are constantly reinforced throughout the series, and they're not subtle. Crocus noted that the Straw Hats reminded him of Roger's crew. Shanks told Rayleigh about meeting a kid whose personality was remarkably similar to their former captains. Whitebeard, Garp, Rayleigh, everyone who knew Roger personally has drawn this connection at some point. Even their dreams appear to be identical, though we still don't know exactly what that dream is. Roger loved big flashy things. He reveled in his title of Pirate King despite knowing that he was dying. He would socialize with his rivals enthusiastically and share his dreams with anyone who was willing to listen to him. He was humble enough to bow when asking favors from Whitebeard and Oden, offering all his treasure in exchange for Oden's temporary service. He forbade his crew from stealing from ordinary civilians because he had standards about who they targeted. He also had a massive soft spot for children. Roger was seen happily cradling baby Hiyori. He encouraged the young mink Pedro by telling him that his moment would come one day. When he learned that his lover was pregnant, Roger asked Garp to protect his unborn child because he believed that no infant should be punished for the sins of their parent. And then there's the romantic side of Roger that the God Valley flashback revealed in hilarious detail. This legendary pirate, the man who would conquer the entire Grand Line, had a weakness for beautiful women that bordered on pathological. His obsession with Shakuyaku was so intense that he repeatedly attacked the Kuja pirates trying to recruit her. He was so flustered by her charm that he became completely powerless in her presence. When he discovered that Shaki had left a love letter for Rayleigh instead of him, Roger genuinely sulked about it. Then he literally went to God Valley primarily to rescue her, announcing to his crew that only he could save Shaki before getting trampled by his own men who wanted to help. This mix of legendary badass and hopeless romantic is what makes Roger feel so human despite his legendary status. He had plenty of flaws as well as embarrassing moments, and he was reckless in ways that made his crewmates scold him like a child. Scopper Gaban apparently argued with Roger constantly about his dangerous tendencies. Roger once needed to recover from injuries in a mountain hospital, and when enemies came to ambush him, Gaban had to fight them all off while Roger healed. So yeah, even though he was the Pirate King, he did need protecting sometimes, as he wasn't invincible. One of Roger's most mysterious abilities was something called the Voice of All Things. According to Rayleigh, this is how Roger located the poneglyphs. He could hear voices that others couldn't perceive. This ability let him communicate with Sea Kings, hear Zunisha speaking, and sense things that should be impossible to detect. But Roger wasn't a scholar. He couldn't actually read the poneglyphs the way that the O'Haran academics could. He heard them, but he couldn't translate them. This limitation is crucial because it explains why Roger needed Oden so desperately for his final voyage. Roger could find the road poneglyphs through the Voice of All Things, but only Oden could decipher what they actually said. The Voice of All Things also connects Roger to some of the most significant figures in the story. Luffy possesses a similar ability, so did Shirahoshi, Oden, and apparently Garp as well. During the God Valley incident, Roger and Garp could hear Rocksteady Zebek's true thoughts even after he had been transformed into a demon. This was through the Voice of All Things. They heard Rox begging them to kill him before he murdered everyone that he loved. That entire moment is devastating because of this ability. Roger could perceive the agony of his greatest rival. He was able to hear his desperate plea for death and had to honor that request in the end. The official story is that Garp and Roger teamed up to defeat Rocksteady Zebek and his legendary crew. The reality, as we now know, was far more complicated. During the chaos, Roger clashed briefly with Whitebeard while creating an opening for Rayleigh to reach Shaki. Once she was rescued, Roger tearfully ordered his crew to retreat. The mission was accomplished, so next everyone had to get out alive. But then things escalated beyond anyone's control. Emu descended on God Valley, possessing Saturn's body. Roger witnessed something that most people in the One Piece world don't even know exists, as he saw the true ruler of the world, the immortal being that sits on the empty throne. Emu appeared on the battlefield, and Roger, being Roger, charged forward anyway. The combined attack from the strongest pirates of the era along with Garp had failed to do any lasting damage due to Emu's immortality. But Roger wasn't ready to give up. When Emu transformed Rox into a demon, moment, Roger found himself fighting alongside Garp against his greatest rival. He heard rocks through the voice of all things, his enemy begging for death rather than being forced to kill his own family. Roger was driven to tears before delivering the final blow. Even against the man who was arguably his worst enemy, Roger felt genuine grief at how things ended. After the battle, Roger's crew discovered that they had accidentally acquired a 1-year-old baby hidden in one of the treasure chests that they looted, a redhead infant who would grow up to become one of the 4 Yonko. Shanks quite literally began his life with the Roger pirates as stolen treasure. The God Valley incident didn't end cleanly for the Roger pirates. Following the battle, they sailed away with their treasure and their captain barely alive. Rayleigh and Gaban had to carry Roger back to the ship after his brutal fight alongside Garp, and in addition to this, the Roger pirates were now responsible for a baby. They decided to keep Shanks, allowing him to grow up on their ship as a pirate apprentice. It was an act of compassion that would have massive consequences for the future of the world. The God Knights became aware that Shanks was among the Roger pirates. They recognized him immediately because Shanks was identical in appearance to Figaland Shamrock. This strongly suggests that he was the child of someone important within the world government's highest circles. The God Knights attempted to retrieve Shanks multiple times over the following years, but every single time they failed. The Roger pirates fought off these immortal warriors repeatedly, protecting their young apprentice from the organization that apparently had some claim to him. The God Knights possess immortality through Emu's power, yet they couldn't successfully reclaim one child from Roger's crew. Whatever the connection between Shanks and the Figaland family, Roger made sure that the boy stayed with the people who actually cared about him. 28 years before the present timeline, Roger received a diagnosis that would define the rest of his life. He had an incurable disease that was killing him. He was already dying and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Most people would have given up, but Roger decided to pitch one final voyage to his crew. It was a final adventure into the Grand Line. Every single member of the Roger pirates agreed to sail with him. At Reverse Mountain, Roger recruited Crocus as his doctor. Not to cure him, that was impossible. It was just to keep him alive long enough to complete what he started. Crocus later explained that Roger's condition worsened steadily throughout the journey. The Pirate King was racing against his own mortality. According to Gaban and Shanks, one of their early stops was Little Garden. This was where they met the giant warriors Dory and Broggy. These two had been locked in a century-long duel on that island, fighting every day to settle a dispute neither could remember. The Roger pirates witnessed this legendary rivalry firsthand. It is a small detail, but it does connect to the larger narrative of giants that has become increasingly important in the recent Elbaf arc. 27 years ago, Shiki the Golden Lion approached Roger with an offer. Shiki had learned that Roger located an ancient weapon. He proposed an alliance, believing that his massive pirate fleet combined with Roger's weapon could conquer the entire world. Shiki even said that he was willing to forget whatever bad blood existed between them, but Roger refused. His explanation was characteristically simple. He wanted to be free. This is so that he could do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. That freedom was more valuable to him than ruling the world could ever be. Shiki declared that Roger's answer meant death. Roger replied that it meant that he would beat Shiki. The Battle of Edward that followed was technically a draw, with a storm destroying half of Shiki's fleet, but Roger had proven his point. He wouldn't bow to anyone. Around a year later, Roger's crew encountered the Whitebeard pirates. What followed was one of the most legendary clashes in One Piece history. Roger spotted Odin charging toward them and immediately rushed forward to fight him personally. He overpowered the samurai quickly before sensing an even stronger presence. Whitebeard had arrived. Their clash split the heavens, two of the strongest pirates in history going blow for blow, their haki-infused attacks creating shockwaves that devastated the surrounding area. The battle between their crews lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Neither side won, but by the end they were exchanging gifts instead of attacks. Roger spoke with Whitebeard and Odin about his intention to reach the final island. He needed Odin specifically because only someone who could read the poneglyphs could help him complete his journey. Roger actually bowed and offered all his treasure in exchange for Odin's temporary service. This infuriated Whitebeard, but Odin himself was intrigued, so he agreed to join Roger for 1 year. With Odin aboard, the Roger pirates made their push toward the end of the Grand Line. They visited Skypiea, the land in the sky, where Roger demonstrated just how potent the Voice of All Things ability truly was. He located the Shandorian Golden Belfry Bell with almost no effort, claiming he could hear its voice calling to him. The bell spoke about an ancient weapon named Poseidon hidden, information that would prove significant later in the story. Roger also encountered Ganfal, who served as the god of Skypiea at the time. The two developed a genuine friendship during Roger's visit, and Ganfal would later recall this encounter with fondness, describing the wonderful memories Roger left with him. Even in a sky island far removed from the blue seas, Roger made connections that lasted decades. Before leaving Skypiea, Roger instructed Odin to inscribe a message on the Golden Bell's surface. This message announced Roger's presence at Skypiea and declared his intended goal to reach the ends of the world. Years later, the Straw Hats would discover this inscription, a direct connection across generations, linking Roger's journey to Luffy's. The crew sailed to Fishman Island, where Roger and Odin heard mysterious voices underwater, unknowingly detecting the Sea Kings. Roger reunited with King Neptune and found the road poneglyph he suspected was hidden in the sea forest. Nearby was another poneglyph, this one containing Joy Boy's letter of apology from 800 years ago, an ancient promise that someone would fulfill in his place. Roger met a young mermaid named Shiarli who possessed prophetic abilities. With a gentle smile, he innocently asked her for some predictions about the future, showing particular interest in Poseidon's whereabouts. Even with a terrifying mermaid prophet, Roger approached her with the same warmth that he showed all children. The crew visited Wano, where Odin's wife Toki became ill and had to stay behind with their children. They found Wano's road poneglyph. They traveled to Zou and befriended the Mink tribe, locating the road poneglyph inside the whale tree. Roger and Odin both experienced the mysterious voice of Zunisha, the ancient elephant carrying the island on its back. Both men were left with feelings of unease from whatever that voice conveyed to them. On Zou, Roger encountered a young mink named Pedro who was desperate to accompany him on his adventure. Pedro practically begged for the opportunity to join the legendary crew on their final voyage. Roger declined the request, but he didn't crush the young mink's spirit. Instead, Roger reassured Pedro that his moment would come one day. He would play an important role in the future. This prophecy would prove devastatingly accurate when Pedro sacrificed himself years later to help the Straw Hats escape Big Mom's territory, fulfilling the destiny that Roger had foreseen. Unfortunately, Roger's condition was deteriorating rapidly. They had to rush. Buggy fell sick and couldn't continue. Shanks volunteered to stay and care for him. Neither apprentice would make it to the final island. With all 4 road poneglyphs transcribed and their location calculated, Roger and his crew made the final push. They reached the island that no one else had found, the last island of the Grand Line. What Roger and his crew discovered on that final island was so unexpected. It was absurd and profound at the same time, and they could only respond in a single way. As they all laughed, every single member of the Roger Pirates burst into laughter at what they found. We still don't know what Joy Boy's treasure is. We don't know the full truth of the Void Century or the ancient weapons or the meaning of the Will of D, but we know Roger's reaction. He wished that he had lived in the same era as Joy Boy. He found the circumstances behind this ancient figure funny in some way that we don't yet understand. Roger named the final island Laughed Hill, the island at the end of the world, named for the laughter that it provoked. This is the genius of Oda's writing. We've known the name of the island for years. Supposedly it was called Raft Hell, but then discovered that the actual name is a pun on laughter. The destination that countless pirates have died trying to reach is literally called Laughed Hill because the truth makes you laugh. This is when Roger made the decision that would define his legacy. He couldn't complete what Joy Boy started, but he could set the stage for someone else who could. Before continuing with Roger's final days, we need to talk about just how absurdly powerful this man was. Roger had the highest bounty in the history of piracy, as it was over 5.5 billion berries. That number has never been surpassed by any living pirate, and Roger achieved this status without eating a single devil fruit. Roger conquered the seas with nothing but his haki and his swordsmanship. Kaido explicitly stated that devil fruits aren't necessary to dominate the world, and Roger was his evidence. Pure haki mastery was enough to make Roger one of the strongest beings in existence. Roger could use all 3 types of haki at the highest levels. His Supreme King haki was potent enough to infuse his attacks, creating those streams of black lightning that indicate advanced application. When he clashed with Whitebeard, their attacks pushed back the Moby Dick from the coastline. Clouds and trees were blasted away just from the residual force. His armament haki let him imbue his sword Ace with enough power to clash evenly against Whitebeard's Murakumogiri, one of the 12 supreme grade blades. He could admit his haki beyond the blade itself, attacking opponents without making physical contact with them. Roger's signature technique was Kamusari, translated as Divine Departure. It's a horizontal slash infused with Supreme King haki that created a massive burst of black lightning-like energy. This single attack overwhelmed Odin's two-sword defense and it sent the samurai flying. Shanks would later inherit this technique, using it against Kid in Elbaf. Against Garp, Roger used Aramitama, a haki-infused strike powerful enough to match the Marines' own empowered punch. Their clashes during their long rivalry always ended in draws because neither could overcome the other. And then there's Roger's final technique, the one he used alongside Garp to defeat the demonically possessed rocks. Hino Kagutsuchi no Esu, meaning God of Fire Ace. Roger infused his sword with both armament and Supreme King haki at what he called critical mass, spinning the blade in his hand before delivering a series of devastating slashes. The technique is named after the fire god in Japanese mythology, as well as being named after his future son and his sword. Roger's physical abilities matched his haki prowess. His endurance also let him fight for 3 consecutive days against Whitebeard without either man backing down, even while being ravaged by his terminal disease. Aided only by Crocus's medical skills, Roger conquered the Grand Line in 3 years. Very few people ever matched Roger in combat. Garp was said to have cornered him multiple times. Roger himself acknowledged only Garp and Sengoku as Marines worth fighting, followed by Rocksteady Zebek, who Roger considered his first and most formidable enemy. Shiki commanded the largest pirate fleet of the era and still couldn't defeat Roger. Roger also fought Chinjao numerous times. Kaido included Roger in his mental list of people capable of standing against him in battle. This is a list that included only Whitebeard, Odin, Shanks, and Zebek. Then there's Roger's relationships. These are the people who defined who he was. Rayleigh stated that the day of Roger's execution was simultaneously the day he laughed the most and cried the most, and drank the most. Shanks and Boogie represent Roger's legacy to the next generation. These 2 apprentices witnessed their captain's execution, weeping in the rain as the blades fell. They went their separate ways afterward, Shanks eventually becoming an emperor while Boogie carved out his own chaotic path, but both of them were fundamentally shaped by serving under Roger. Shanks inherited his captain's straw hat and eventually passed it on to Luffy. Boogie's connection to Roger gave him enough credibility to recruit hundreds of powerful pirates just based on that association. When it comes to Odin, he thought so highly of Roger that he may have respected him even more than Whitebeard, his previous captain. When Odin heard about Roger's execution, he simultaneously laughed and cried, perfectly capturing the contradictory emotions that Roger inspired in everyone that knew him. Then who could forget his relationship with Podcast D Rouge, Roger's lover and the mother of his child. We know very little about their relationship beyond its outcome. They fell in love in Batarilla and Rouge became pregnant with Roger's child. Roger came up with 2 names depending on the gender, Anne for a girl, Ace for a boy, and then Roger left knowing that he would never live to see his child born. Rouge proved her love through the impossible. She kept Ace in her womb for 20 months. It was an unnatural pregnancy that cost her life, but it protected her son from the world government's hunt for Roger's bloodline. She named their child Gol D Ace, wanting him to carry his father's name. Even in death, she believed in what Roger represented. After leaving Laugh Tale, Roger made a series of decisions that would reshape history. He disbanded the Roger Pirates, refusing to let his crew be hunted after his death. He met with Whitebeard one final time to share what he'd learned. He found Rouge and fathered a son. He entrusted that son's safety to his greatest rival Garp, and then Roger turned himself into the Marines. The world government wrongly assumed that they would be making an example of him. They brought the Pirate King back to his birthplace of Loguetown for a public execution. They gathered crowds of witnesses. They wanted the world to see what happened to pirates who defied them, but they ended up making their biggest mistake in history. Roger walked to the execution platform with a smile on his face. Witnesses report that he showed no fear, no regret, no hesitation. The man who conquered the Grand Line looked death in the eyes and smiled like he was greeting an old friend. Someone in that crowd called out to him, asking where he had hidden his treasure, and Roger, with the entire world watching, delivered the words that would echo through generations. "My wealth and treasure, if you want it, I'll let you have it. Search for it. I left it all at that place." The executioner blades fell. Gol D Roger died with a smile smile on his face, and the world went absolutely insane. The world government wanted Roger's death to discourage piracy. Instead, his final words sparked the greatest explosion of piracy that the world had ever seen. Countless people set sail to find the One Piece as the great pirate era began. The crowd at Roger's execution included future emperors, future warlords, future revolutionaries, all of them inspired by a dying man's declaration. Dragon witnessed the world government's atrocities at God Valley and would later form the Revolutionary Army. Doflamingo was in that crowd, a child who would grow up to become one of the most dangerous pirates in the world. Everyone who heard Roger's words was forever changed by them. Roger's legacy extends far beyond the great pirate era that he started. His actions set in motion events that would continue to drive the entire One Piece narrative. The Four Emperors system exists because Roger's crew disbanded and went their separate ways. Whitebeard became the strongest man in the world. Big Mom established Totoland. Kaido created his Beast Pirates and conquered Wano. Shanks formed the Red Hair Pirates and eventually joined their ranks. 3 of the original 4 emperors were former members of the Rocks Pirates who disbanded after their captain's death, and then there was Shanks, who was Roger's protege. The entire power structure of the pirate world traces back to Roger in one way or another. The paranoia of the world government shaped their policies for decades as they hunted anyone with connections to Roger, no matter how tenuous. Tom was sentenced to death simply for building the Oro Jackson. Members of the Roger Pirates still carry active bounties nearly 25 years after disbanding. The government's willingness to cover up God Valley proved that they would erase entire events from history when convenient. Roger's bloodline became the most dangerous heritage in the world. The government inspected every child born within 10 months of Roger's final known location. Any infant suspected of connection to Roger was to be killed. This hunt forced Rouge to keep Ace in a womb for an impossibly long pregnancy. It made Ace's very existence a crime punishable by death. Ace grew up hating his father. He heard nothing but condemnation of Roger from the civilians around him. From the pirates who had been victimized by Roger's crew, Ace disowned his heritage, using his mother's surname instead. He wanted nothing to do with Roger's legacy, and yet Ace inherited more from Roger than he ever acknowledged. The refusal to run from a fight, even when death was certain, the fierce protectiveness of loved ones, the willingness to kill anyone who threatened the people that he cared about. Dardan had seen Roger within the eyes of Ace when the boy refused to flee from Blue Jam. Shanks noted at Ace's grave that he was exactly like his captain, a man who would never run away no matter how desperate the situation. The Summit War of Marineford was ultimately a conflict over Roger's legacy. The world government executed Ace publicly to erase Roger's bloodline completely. Whitebeard fought with everything that he had to save a young man that he'd come to view as a son, regardless of whose biological child Ace actually was. Luffy nearly died trying to rescue his brother. Whitebeard's final words confirmed what Roger had declared 25 years earlier. The One Piece exists, it's real. Someone will find it. The flame that Roger ignited with his dying breath cannot be extinguished. And then there's Luffy, who inherited Roger's straw hat through Shanks, and who now shares in Roger's dream, who possesses the same voice of all things ability, who draws the same comparisons from everyone who knew the Pirate King personally. Really spent 2 years training Luffy and concluded that he had grown to be more worthy of the hat than anyone else. The Will of D continues through a rubber child from the East Blue who wants nothing more than to be free. Before his death, Dr. Vegapunk left a message for the world, explaining that Roger and his crew had uncovered the true history when they reached the final island. They learned about Joy Boy, about the Great Kingdom, about the ancient weapons. This information shocked everyone listening and intensified the race to find the One Piece. Roger had an unknown dream, something he believed reaching Laugh Tale and obtaining Joy Boy's treasure would help him to accomplish. When he told Whitebeard about this dream, Whitebeard laughed at how silly or impossible it sounded. When he told Oden, the samurai was left in awe and shock. Oden wrote down Roger's exact words in his journal, which Yamato later retrieved. Here's what makes this mystery so compelling. Luffy has the exact same dream. He told it to Ace and Sabo as children. He told it to his entire crew after the time skip. When Ace told Yamato what Luffy had said years earlier, Yamato cried at the similarities between Luffy and Roger. We still don't know what this dream is. Whatever Roger wanted to accomplish by becoming Pirate King, Luffy wants the exact same thing. Yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have on Gol D Roger, the most famous and mysterious character within One Piece. The Great Pirate Era exists because one man refused to let his dream die with him. The Straw Hat passed from Roger to Shanks to Luffy. It's a physical inheritance of will across generations. The search for One Piece continues because Roger's final words burn themselves into history. Wealth, fame, power, the man who had acquired everything in this world, and in the end, what mattered the most was what he left behind, and the memories that he had shared with the people who now speak of him so fondly. We've now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about the incredible character Gol D Roger? If there is anything that I've forgotten to mention, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.